The association chairwoman stood on my great-uncle's porch, clutching foreclosure documents and grinning like she'd struck gold. What she didn't realize, I controlled the marina she was admiring and the exclusive boat launch her pristine development required. I'm Marcus, and 4 months ago, I believed I was about to lose everything my ancestors had built. This woman, Victoria Sterling, had determined my weathered boathouse was a blight that had no place in her immaculate subdivision. She granted me 48 hours to vacate the property my great-uncle had bequeathed me or face immediate legal consequences. But here's what predators never learn. They rarely investigate their prey thoroughly enough. And Victoria had chosen to battle the wrong bloodline. What would you do if some power-obsessed neighbor attempted to erase your family's heritage? Share your retaliation strategies below, and tell me where you're viewing from. I guarantee your community association nightmares rival this one. Post them in the comments. Let me transport you to where this conflict originated. 18 months ago, I inherited my great-uncle Samuel's waterfront boathouse after he died at 87. This wasn't some luxury retreat. It was a solid refuge constructed in 1959 from native Cyprus, where 4 generations of my lineage had discovered tranquility. Samuel always laughed and called it his worthless bayou property, winking like he possessed the world's greatest secret. I once assumed it was simply his modest nature. Turns out great-uncle was orchestrating grand strategy, while everyone else was playing simple games. After my business partnership collapsed along with my urban career, I exchanged my downtown marketing firm for freelance digital work and genuine peace of mind. The boathouse rested on what county records listed as 1.8 acres of wetland forest and marshes. Each sunrise delivered the mystical cry of egrets resonating across glass-smooth waters. I'd drink tea watching ancient blue herons hunt minnows in the shallows, their movements so calculated they appeared choreographed. Twilight found me on the aged pier, toes trailing in water so transparent you could observe shells 15 feet below. Those weathered pier planks, polished mirror-bright by generations of family celebrations, felt like returning home to my authentic self. But paradise inevitably attracts predators. 4 years ago, developer Marcus Wellington completed Bayshore Manor, 39 matching luxury homes that emerged around our marina like some affluent plague. Most newcomers were respectable people, professionals fleeing metropolitan chaos, growing families pursuing the same serenity I'd discovered. But every community breeds its despot, and ours arrived wearing designer yacht club attire. Victoria Sterling materialized from some manufactured suburb in her pristine Lexus, appearing like she'd emerged from a lifestyle magazine photo shoot. Within 8 months, she'd proclaimed herself Empress of the Waterfront Preservation Society. Her dictatorship commenced with the gentle elderly Garcias, who received a $250 penalty for declining to repaint their delightful storage shed regulation. Cream! Next, she targeted Korean War veteran Frank Russo, demanding he dismantle his unauthorized Veterans Memorial or face $75 daily sanctions until compliance. The percussion of her luxury pumps against concrete became our development's emergency alert. We'd detect that sharp tap, tap, tap and understand someone was about to receive instruction regarding maintaining investment security and neighborhood standards. 14 months ago, the association officially incorporated when Wellington sold his remaining parcels. That's when Victoria unveiled her authentic aspiration: absolute dominance. She persuaded 6 spineless board members to retroactively assert jurisdiction over all marina properties, including my great-uncle's boathouse, that predated their artificial paradise by 35 years. I recall considering how my cousin Angela, the retired property attorney, always cautioned that associations could claim authority they didn't legally possess if nobody challenged them. This woman actually possessed the audacity to claim control over land that was hosting fishermen before she was hosting cocktail parties at country clubs. The intimidation intensified like a malignant growth. Monthly invoices for $250 in obligatory association dues. Certified letters demanding $900 in architectural compliance fines because my boathouse's authentic Cypress siding wasn't approved subdivision beige composite. I fed them to my fireplace, assuming any competent attorney would ridicule these demands into oblivion. My great-uncle's place had been grandfathered since the Kennedy era, or so I believed. I'd never actually confirmed what legal protections inherited properties possessed, but Victoria doesn't accept rejection. She retained some predatory lawyer who probably received his credentials from a correspondence course, filing fraudulent liens against my property. When that failed, she had the nerve to investigate my business dissolution records, portraying me as some unreliable vagrant who endangered community stability. The neighborhood fractured like brittle glass. Victoria's enforcement faction included perhaps 8 devoted followers, people so desperate for suburban perfection they'd sacrifice their integrity for coordinated landscaping. Another 15 residents privately supported me, but remained silent after witnessing Victoria demolish the Garcias and Frank. The remainder simply wanted harmony, and couldn't comprehend why anyone cared if my boathouse appeared rustic instead of ridiculous. Then arrived that sharp Thursday morning when Victoria strutted up my front steps, designer heels drumming against great-uncle's weathered cypress boards like a declaration of war. She gripped those foreclosure papers like a conquistador claiming territory, her expensive fragrance failing to disguise the odor of pure arrogance. Standing there observing this yacht club dictator lecture me about standards on land my family had claimed before she existed, I remembered great-uncle's enigmatic smile whenever he'd referenced his worthless bayou property. Time to uncover what he'd actually bequeathed me. The following morning, I stood in my kitchen watching Victoria's Lexus gleaming in what everyone assumed was the community marina parking, sipping coffee that tasted like liquid retribution. This woman had gravely miscalculated who she was confronting. Within 18 hours of delivering her foreclosure ultimatum, Victoria had already escalated to nuclear warfare. She'd submitted a formal complaint with County Environmental Enforcement, claiming my great-uncle's old workshop was an unpermitted structure creating immediate ecological hazards. The workshop that had survived 43 hurricanes while these luxury homes were already displaying structural problems after 4 years. But that was merely her opening gambit. Saturday evening at the Morrisons' fish fry, I observed Victoria manipulate the gathering like a candidate at a fundraiser, the savory aroma of frying catfish mixed with her toxic rumors as she held court near the coleslaw, weaving stories about my unstable conduct and complete disregard for community welfare. We simply cannot permit one selfish individual to obliterate what we've all invested in, she proclaimed, dabbing hot sauce from her lips like she was cleaning blood from a weapon. Her voice carried that particular tone of moral authority that makes rational people want to hurl objects. Then came her cyber warfare offensive. Victoria published a manifesto on our neighborhood social media group about defending our collective values and property investments. She'd included photographs of my boathouse captured from deliberately unflattering perspectives with captions like, "When community cooperation fails," and "Why architectural standards exist." Her post received 4 likes from her enforcement cult members and 31 laughing emojis from everyone else. But the toxin was spreading. That's when something my cousin Angela had mentioned during last Thanksgiving dinner crystallized into focus. She'd been sharing stories about property law cases, noting how old waterfront properties often carried legal protections that most people never bothered investigating. "Intelligent property owners always verify their rights before surrendering to tyrants," she'd said, raising her wine glass. "Knowledge is the most powerful weapon against injustice." Monday morning discovered me in the county courthouse basement, surrounded by the musty fragrance of decades-old files and the fluorescent buzz of bureaucratic limbo. I was searching for something specific, any legal protections my great-uncle's property might possess that could override Victoria's manufactured authority. Helen, the filing clerk who'd been organizing deeds since the Reagan administration, became my archaeological guide through layers of property history. "Sweetie, most people never examine beyond their tax records," she said, retrieving thick folders with the efficiency of someone who'd performed this routine 10,000 times. "But old waterfront properties, they're like aged bourbon. Sometimes they improve with time." What I discovered made my pulse race like I discovered treasure. My property carried something called established riparian rights, dating back to the original 1887 homestead grant. These weren't just theoretical legal concepts. They meant my family held special privileges regarding water access that couldn't be superseded by newcomer regulations or association demands. Even better, every structure on my land predated current zoning by decades, protecting them under grandfather clause provisions that made them legally untouchable. But here's where Helen delivered the real bombshell that transformed everything. "Honey, this legal description is fascinating," she said, squinting at faded ink through her reading glasses. "Your property boundary extends much further south than what's displayed on modern tax maps. See this notation here? It references a 1961 boundary survey that includes an additional 180 feet of land area." My blood turned to ice water as the implication struck me. "What's 180 feet south of my boathouse?" Helen smiled like she was delivering the world's greatest Christmas gift. "According to this, it would include that paved marina area your neighbors use, the one everyone believes belongs to the community." The massive revelation hit like a lightning strike. Victoria had been threatening to evict me from my own property, while her entire neighborhood trespassed on my land daily. I photocopied every document with trembling hands, my mind calculating the possibilities. If these boundaries were accurate, every single vehicle in that community marina was stationed on my private property, including Victoria's precious Lexus. Cousin, Angela's law office still smelled like leather furniture, and 4 decades of legal triumphs when I burst through her door an hour later. Her weathered face illuminated as she spread my documents across her desk like a commander planning the perfect campaign. "Marcus, my dear nephew," she said, adjusting glasses that had witnessed 3 decades of David versus Goliath battles. "Your great-uncle was even more brilliant than I realized. This Victoria character just initiated combat with the wrong family." She traced the property lines with her finger, decades of experience reading legal descriptions like musical notation. "If these boundaries are accurate, your association problem just became their parking problem. But we need an updated survey to confirm this before we detonate any explosives." Driving home past that marina, watching Victoria's Lexus sparkle in the afternoon sun on what might be my land, I couldn't stop smiling. She wanted to engage in legal warfare with my family's legacy. Let the games begin. Victoria didn't waste time nursing her wounds. By Wednesday morning, she'd scheduled an emergency association meeting for Friday evening, complete with official notices posted on every mailbox like arrest warrants. The agenda read like a battle declaration, addressing non-compliant properties and immediate community safety concerns. But her real masterstroke arrived Thursday afternoon when she launched a door-to-door propaganda campaign, her designer heels clicking across driveways like a metronome of manipulation. I watched from my kitchen window as she worked the neighborhood with military precision, clipboard gripped like a weapon, selling fear to anyone desperate enough to purchase it. "We need to demonstrate unity," I heard her tell the Hendersons, her voice dripping that artificial sweetness that makes your skin crawl. "If we don't act decisively, property values will plummet. Do you really want your retirement investment destroyed by one selfish holdout who believes rules don't apply to him?" By evening, she'd collected signatures from 27 households, supporting immediate and aggressive legal action to protect our shared investment. The acrid smell of neighbor versus neighbor warfare hung over our little paradise like smoke from a burning home. That's when I decided to stop playing defense and start hunting for ammunition. Great-uncle's basement had always been forbidden, territory during family visits packed with what he dismissively called old paperwork and ancient history. But grief makes you courageous, and impending foreclosure makes you desperate. I descended into that cypress-scented time capsule armed with nothing but a flashlight and the growing certainty that Samuel had been concealing something important. The man had been a record-keeping genius. Every property tax bill since Johnson was president, every permit application, every fragment of correspondence with county officials, all organized in chronological perfection inside boxes that smelled like cedar oil and decades of careful preservation. But it was the cedar chest tucked in the corner, locked tighter than a bank vault, that made my pulse quicken. Inside lay buried treasure that would change everything. The original 1961 property survey, hand-drawn with surveyor's precision and signed by someone named Theodore Kane. This wasn't just any boundary map. This was the master document used to divide my great-great-grandfather's sprawling homestead into smaller parcels. And according to these measurements, my property didn't end where 39 families assumed it did. My heart pounded against my ribs as I traced the southern boundary line with a shaking finger. The property extended exactly 183 feet beyond what modern tax maps showed, engulfing a boat-shaped section of land that included every square inch of pavement where the entire neighborhood parked their vehicles. The revelation struck like freezing lake water in winter. For 4 solid years, I'd been witnessing mass trespassing every single morning without realizing it. Every Lexus, every SUV, every work truck that crunched across that asphalt lot was sitting on my private property. But 60-year-old surveys might not survive modern legal scrutiny without professional verification. Friday morning found me begging Nathan Kane, Theodore's son who'd inherited the family business, to squeeze in an emergency boundary verification. Dad always said that homestead division created some interesting complications, Nathan told me, loading GPS equipment that looked like it belonged in a space mission. His weathered hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd been settling property disputes since he could hold a measuring tape. Original surveys like yours often reveal surprises that got lost when counties went digital in the 90s. 3 hours later, Nathan's space-age equipment confirmed what great-uncle's faded ink had claimed. My southern boundary sliced straight through the heart of community parking. "This is bulletproof," Nathan announced, downloading coordinates that would detonate Victoria's little kingdom. "Your property line cuts right through that marina lot. I'd estimate about 12 prime spots sit entirely on your land, plus the main entrance access road." The massive revelation exploded in my brain. Like a firework, Victoria had spent weeks collecting signatures demanding my foreclosure, while her entire army of supporters committed daily trespassing on my property. But Nathan wasn't finished dropping bombshells. "There's something else your great-uncle left. You," he said, cross-referencing measurements against historical water records he'd pulled that morning. "This survey includes riparian boundaries that extend into the marina itself. Looks like your family owns more than just the parking lot." He pointed toward the water where a dozen boats bobbed peacefully at their moorings. "See those slip rentals? Everyone's been paying the association. They're anchored in water that legally belongs to you." My mind reeled as the implications crashed over me like a tsunami. Not only did I own the parking lot, I owned the marina bottom where every boat in the neighborhood was moored. The association had been collecting slip fees for 4 years on water that belonged to me. Friday evening arrived heavy with the promise of warfare. The community center crackled with tension as 38 residents squeezed into folding chairs, the air thick with nervous energy and burnt coffee. Victoria commanded the front of the room like a general addressing troops before battle, armed with her petition and delusions of authority. "Tonight, we reclaim our community," she declared, her voice carrying the kind of righteous fury that starts crusades. I sat in the back row, great-uncle's survey burning like dynamite in my lap, watching this woman orchestrate my destruction while literally standing on my stolen land. Time to teach everyone a lesson about conducting research before initiating battles. The weekend after Victoria's War Council brought psychological warfare that would have impressed dictators. Saturday morning, I woke to find a Channel 12 news van parked in what I now knew was my marina, complete with a brunette reporter practicing her deeply concerned citizen expression in the side mirror. Victoria had weaponized local media, spinning, a masterpiece of fiction about a dangerous squatter situation threatening community safety. The reporter, a fresh-faced kid named Amanda who looked like she'd gotten her journalism degree from a cereal box, devoured every syllable of Victoria's Oscar-worthy performance. "This individual has repeatedly violated community safety standards and shown complete contempt for his neighbor's well-being," Victoria declared to the camera, gesturing toward my boathouse like she was identifying a biohazard. The morning breeze carried her voice across the water, poisoning the air with manufactured outrage. But that theatrical performance was just her opening act. Sunday evening delivered the real psychological torture, Victoria's Neighborhood Safety Patrol. 5 clipboard-wielding volunteers began documenting my every breath like I was under federal surveillance, photographing me checking mail, recording timestamps when I left for groceries. The sharp crunch of their footsteps on my gravel driveway became the soundtrack to my personal police state. Monday morning brought her nuclear option, a restraining order petition filed with theatrical flair at the county courthouse. According to her sworn statement, I'd made threatening remarks about property boundaries and exhibited increasingly erratic behavior that endangers community members. The woman had actually convinced 3 neighbors to commit perjury for her crusade. The Williams family, who owed her money from some bogus committee fundraiser, and Mrs. Chen, who lived in terror of losing her Perfect Garden Award, had provided sworn statements about my hostile attitude threatening their quality of life and property values. That's when I stopped gathering intelligence and started deploying weapons of mass destruction. During my business dissolution proceedings, Cousin Angela had taught me the golden rule of legal warfare. When someone builds a case against you, you better build a fortress against them. While Victoria played neighborhood prosecutor, I was researching the one discovery that could obliterate her entire kingdom. Who actually owned the marina that gave Bayshore Manor its multi-million-dollar appeal? The State Water Management Department felt like archaeological expedition headquarters. Endless filing cabinets stretching back generations, staffed by civil servants who'd been tracking water ownership since the Ice Age carved the first marina. Beds. Most folks assume all marinas belong to the state, explained Margaret, a 38-year department veteran whose gray hair had witnessed more water rights battles than the Supreme Court. But marinas can remain privately owned if they meet specific historical criteria and were never formally transferred to public management. What those dusty files revealed made my entire body tremble like I'd grabbed a live electrical wire. Our marina, all 31 crystal-clear acres that every single Bayshore Manor resident used for swimming, boating, fishing, and bragging to their suburban friends, had never been transferred from private ownership to state control. When my great-great-grandfather's homestead was divided in 1961, the water rights stayed attached to the main parcel, my parcel. I didn't just own waterfront property, I owned the entire marina. Every morning when neighbors launched their boats, they were trespassing on my water. Every summer evening when families splashed at the community beach, they were swimming in my private marina. Every boat slip fee the association had collected for 4 years, $175 monthly per slip, times 21 boats times 48 months. That was $176,400 in stolen rental income from water that belonged to me. The massive revelation exploded in my brain like a supernova. Victoria wasn't just running a harassment campaign, she was operating an illegal commercial enterprise on my private property. But the water rights documentation revealed something even more devastating to her little empire. The association had been advertising boat slips to prospective residents as a premier community amenity, included with membership. They'd been using my marina as their primary selling point, inflating property values with my water while simultaneously trying to foreclose on me for being an architectural eyesore. Tuesday afternoon, Nathan and I mapped every square inch of my underwater empire using sonar equipment that looked like it belonged on alien spacecraft. The boundaries were ironclad. I owned every foot of marina bottom, every inch of shoreline except for tiny slivers directly touching other properties. This is absolutely unprecedented, Nathan said, reviewing measurements that would rewrite our entire community's understanding of reality. Your great-uncle left you control over the one asset this whole neighborhood depends on for their lifestyle, their property values, their entire identity. Wednesday brought Victoria's final desperate escalation. She'd scheduled an emergency community meeting for Friday night, but this time she'd invited County Sheriff Rodriguez to maintain order during discussions of criminal trespassing charges. The woman was planning to have me arrested at my own kangaroo court trial. Her flyer, distributed like propaganda leaflets to every mailbox, read like a terrorist alert. Final community meeting regarding dangerous non-compliance. Sheriff's Department will attend to ensure public safety. Thursday evening I sat on my pier, watching sunset paint my marina in shades of gold and crimson, surrounded by boats anchored in my water while cars rested on my land. Tomorrow night Victoria would attempt to destroy me in front of the entire community. She had absolutely no idea I was about to reveal that I owned everything that made her neighborhood worth living in. Friday morning arrived crackling with electricity, and I knew it was time to unleash the nuclear option. Cousin Angela met me at her office at 7 a.m., the scent of fresh coffee mixing with decades of leather-bound legal victories as I spread my arsenal of documents across her battle-scarred mahogany desk. "Sweet mother of pearl, Marcus," she breathed, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she absorbed the magnitude of what great-uncle had left me. Her 40 years of property law experience had never prepared her for anything this spectacular. Your Samuel wasn't just intelligent. He was playing multidimensional chess while everyone else was playing tic-tac-toe. We spent 3 hours dissecting every document like surgeons, Angela's excitement building with each revelation. Her reading glasses fogged with anticipation as she cross-referenced boundary surveys with water rights, her calculator working overtime to quantify the scope of my inheritance. But then she discovered something that made even her seasoned lawyers' composure shatter completely. "Jesus Christ on a bicycle," she whispered, pulling out receipts and financial records I hadn't even noticed in great-uncle's files. "Marcus, the association hasn't just been collecting boat slip fees. They've been running a full-scale commercial marina operation on your water. The numbers hit like a financial avalanche. 21 boat slips at $175 monthly for 48 months. $176,400 annual marina access fees of $75 from all 39 households. $11,700 yearly summer day use privileges at $35 per guest family. Another $18,200 annually premium fishing licenses at $125 each, $5,250 more. We're looking at over $220,000 in unauthorized commercial exploitation of your property," Angela calculated, her pen scratching across legal pads like she was documenting the heist of the century. The musty smell of old law books seemed to intensify with each shocking revelation. "In legal terms, that's not just trespassing. That's conversion, unjust enrichment, commercial theft, and potentially criminal fraud." The power dynamic shifted so violently, I could feel reality rearranging itself around me. I wasn't some defenseless victim fighting foreclosure. I was a property owner who just discovered 4 years of systematic theft by an entire community that didn't even realize they were thieves. But Angela was just getting warmed up. "There's something even more devastating," she said, spreading property tax records across her desk like a general planning the perfect siege. "Look at how every single house in Bayshore Manor has been assessed for tax purposes." Her finger traced columns of numbers that told an incredible story of community-wide deception. Every property in the development had received substantial tax reductions for being classified as marina community residences, with shared water access privileges. The county had been giving residents collective tax breaks worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, based on their assumed legal right to use my water. Your neighbors have saved roughly $280,000 collectively in property taxes over 4 years because the county believed they had legitimate marina access, Angela explained, her voice rising with the thrill of discovery. But that access was never legally granted. It was just assumed when the development was platted. The revelation struck like lightning splitting an oak tree. Not only had the association stolen massive rental income from my property, but every single neighbor had been fraudulently receiving tax benefits based on water access they had no legal right to claim. I wasn't fighting one delusional association chairwoman. I was sitting on evidence that could expose an entire community's unwitting participation in tax fraud and property theft. "Here's our battle plan," Angela declared, her strategic mind shifting into full warfare mode. "Tonight we let Victoria hang herself with her own rope. Then we drop the parking lot bombshell. But we save the marina ownership revelation for the nuclear option, only if she refuses to negotiate reasonably." She leaned forward, 4 decades of David versus Goliath battles gleaming in her eyes like distant lightning. "Because once we reveal you own that marina, everything changes forever. Every property value, every tax assessment, every boat slip, every summer barbecue, it all becomes subject to your personal approval." The crushing weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders. I could obliterate every property value in the neighborhood with one legal filing, or I could use this leverage to build something better for everyone. Great-uncle hadn't just left me property, he'd left me the power to reshape an entire community's destiny. The next 6 hours felt like preparing for the legal equivalent of D-Day. Cousin Angela transformed from sleepy, semi-retired country lawyer into a strategic war general, her cluttered office becoming mission control for what she kept calling the most beautiful property rights revenge story of my 40-year career. "Listen up, soldier," Angela barked, pulling out her ancient Rolodex that looked like it had survived 3 wars and a nuclear apocalypse. "We're not just fighting one delusional association chairwoman tonight. We're establishing a new community, power structure. This requires precision, witnesses, and enough legal firepower to make the Supreme Court weep with joy." The acrid smell of fresh ink and nervous excitement filled her office as our first recruit arrived. Nathan burst through the door with surveying equipment that could measure property lines to spacecraft precision, his weathered face glowing with the anticipation of someone about to witness legal history. "I've staked your visible boundaries with orange flags bright enough to be seen from orbit," Nathan announced, spreading official maps across Angela's desk like a general planning the perfect siege. "Anyone driving into that marina tonight will see exactly where their trespassing begins. No wiggle room, no confusion, no excuses." But Angela had recruited an even deadlier weapon. Sarah Bennett, her old environmental law colleague, arrived carrying a briefcase that probably contained enough water rights precedents to flood a courtroom. Her smile suggested she lived for exactly these kinds of legal demolition projects. "Private. Marina ownership cases are rarer than unicorn sightings," Sarah explained, her voice vibrating with the excitement of someone who'd found the holy grail of property law. "When someone controls an entire marina in a residential community, it creates leverage that can reshape everything. You don't just own water. You own the foundation of everyone's property values and lifestyle dreams." Then Gerald knocked on Angela's door, and everything got exponentially more interesting. My quiet neighbor from 4 houses down had been conducting his own surveillance operation that would have impressed the FBI. His garage workshop smelled like sawdust and righteous anger as he revealed boxes of evidence that made my discoveries look like amateur hour. "I've been documenting Victoria's corruption for 9 months, Gerald said, pulling out folders organized with military precision that made my heart race. Financial records, recorded threats, photographs of trespassing incidents, even phone recordings of her admitting to inflating legal costs and skimming association funds for personal expenses. The evidence was devastating. Victoria had been claiming her Lexus lease payments as community transportation expenses. Her country club membership was filed under professional development for association leadership. Last month's supposed $2,100 emergency legal consultation had actually cost the association $650. With Victoria pocketing the $1,450 difference. "She's been treating the association treasury like her personal ATM, Gerald continued, his quiet voice carrying the cold fury of someone who'd been watching injustice for too long. "I estimate she's embezzled over $18,000 in the past year alone." Chest tightened with a mixture of rage and anticipation. Victoria wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor. She was a common thief who'd been stealing from everyone while playing innocent victim. Angela orchestrated our battle strategy with the precision of someone who'd spent decades turning David into Goliath slayers. I would present the parking lot evidence first, shocking but not nuclear. Sarah would handle water rights law explanations in terms neighbors could understand. Nathan would provide real-time GPS demonstrations that couldn't be argued with. Gerald would document everything while keeping corruption evidence in reserve. "Remember the golden rule of legal warfare," Angela coached as we rehearsed our presentation. "We're not there to destroy people. We're there to establish justice and offer solutions that benefit everyone except the criminals. The moment we appear vindictive, we lose the moral high ground that makes victory inevitable." During my crash course in property law that afternoon, I'd learned things that every property owner should know, but most never discover. Old properties often have boundaries that differ significantly from tax records. Always get actual surveys, not assumptions. Water rights can be privately owned even when everyone assumes they're public. Research before you pay fees to use water that might belong to someone else. Most importantly, when facing legal harassment, professional documentation and evidence gathering beat emotional reactions every single time. Sarah had researched market rates that would make our settlement offer irresistible. We'd propose parking at $30 monthly per household, below market rate. Marina access at $125 annually per family, an absolute steal. Boat slips at $85 monthly, incredibly generous compared to private marina rates. Your proposal needs to be so reasonable that refusing it makes Victoria look like a psychopath, Sarah advised, running calculations that would make everyone winners, except corrupt officials. By 6 p.m., our legal army was locked and loaded. Angela would demolish their authority with property law. Nathan would prove boundaries with GPS precision. Sarah would explain water rights in plain English. Gerald would record everything for potential criminal proceedings. The evening air crackled, with electricity as I drove toward the community center, my truck loaded with documents that would detonate Victoria's little empire. Tonight, 39 families would discover who actually owned the paradise they'd been fighting over. Victoria had wanted to destroy my family's legacy with fake legal authority. Time to show her what real legal research looked like. The community center buzzed with the electric tension of a courtroom awaiting a death penalty verdict. 42 residents packed into folding chairs designed for 25, the air thick with nervous anticipation and the lingering smell of burnt coffee from a pot that had been brewing since morning. Sheriff Rodriguez positioned himself near the back wall, his presence adding official gravity to what everyone expected would be my public execution. Victoria commanded the front of the room like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments in the trial of the century. She dressed for victory in a crisp navy blazer and her most authoritative pearls, armed with her slideshow of destruction, and Bradley Pearson sitting beside her like an expensive legal executioner. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the righteous fury of someone about to deliver divine justice, "tonight, we reclaim our community from an individual who has shown complete contempt for everything we've built together." Her presentation unfolded like a masterpiece of character assassination, photo after photo of my boathouse from deliberately unflattering angles, financial projections showing how my non-compliance threatened everyone's property values, even testimony from neighbors about how my hostile attitude had created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. This person has repeatedly ignored legal notices, violated community standards, and shown complete disregard for his neighbors' safety and financial well-being, Victoria declared, clicking through slides that painted me as everything short of a domestic terrorist. "We are dealing with someone who believes rules don't apply to him." The room murmured with appreciation for her thorough documentation. Several residents nodded approvingly as she detailed my supposed crimes against suburban harmony. Bradley Pearson smiled like a shark smelling blood in the water. "Therefore," Victoria announced with the dramatic flourish of someone delivering a death sentence, "I move that this board authorize immediate legal action, including daily fines of $400 until full compliance is achieved, plus recovery of all legal costs incurred by this individual's stubborn refusal to cooperate with reasonable community standards." The motion was seconded immediately, hands raised around the room in support of ending my reign of terror once and for all. Even Sheriff Rodriguez seemed to be taking notes, probably preparing to discuss criminal charges after the civil matters were settled. That's when I stood up. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling, for that thorough presentation," I said, my voice carrying, across the suddenly quiet room with the calm confidence of someone about to detonate a nuclear weapon. "I have some information that might interest everyone before we vote on anything." Cousin Angela stepped forward carrying our briefcase of legal ammunition while Nathan wheeled in GPS equipment that looked like it belonged at NASA Mission Control. The room's energy shifted from certainty to curiosity as residents realized this wasn't going to be the one-sided execution they'd expected. "Before we discuss my alleged violations," I continued, nodding to Nathan, who began setting up his boundary projection system, "I think everyone should know exactly whose property we're talking about." Nathan's equipment hummed to life, projecting precise GPS coordinates onto the community center wall. The display showed an aerial view of our neighborhood with property lines marked in bright colors that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. "According to official county surveys verified this week," I announced as the display showed my property boundaries extending far beyond what anyone had assumed, "my family's land includes approximately 65% of the marina area that this entire community uses daily." Gasps echoed around the room as residents processed what they were seeing. The marina they'd been treating as community property for 4 years was mostly my private land. Every single day, dozens of families had been trespassing without realizing. "That's impossible," Victoria shouted, her composed facade cracking like thin ice. "That marina belongs to the community. We've been maintaining it for years." "Actually," Cousin Angela said, stepping forward with the gentle authority of someone who'd been winning property disputes since before most of these people were born, "maintaining someone else's property without permission doesn't establish ownership. It establishes trespassing with improvements." But I wasn't finished dropping bombshells that would reshape everyone's understanding of reality. "There's something else you should know," I continued, watching Victoria's face cycle through confusion, anger, and dawning horror. "The marina that gives this community its name, its property values, and its entire identity, according to state water management records, that's privately owned too." The room fell completely silent except for the hum of Nathan's equipment and the sound of 39 property owners realizing their paradise might not be what they thought it was. Every boat in that water, every swimming party, every fishing trip. "You've been using my family's private marina for 4 years while your association collected fees for access to water that belongs to me." Sheriff Rodriguez straightened up, suddenly very interested in the legal implications of what he was witnessing. Bradley Pearson looked like he was calculating how quickly he could distance himself from a client who'd just been exposed as either incompetent or fraudulent. "Every boat slip fee you've paid," I announced, looking directly at Victoria, whose pearls seemed to be choking her. "Every marina access charge, every dollar you've spent for the privilege of using this water, you've been paying the wrong people." The mic drop moment arrived with devastating precision. "Mrs. Sterling, you've been trying to foreclose on me from property I own while running an illegal commercial operation on a marina that belongs to me." The room exploded in chaos as 39 families realized their property values, their lifestyle, their entire community identity depended on the generosity of the man their association chairwoman had been trying to destroy. The chaos that followed my revelations could have powered a small city. 39 property owners suddenly realized their entire lifestyle depended on the man their association chairwoman had spent months trying to destroy. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a surveyor's chain. Sheriff Rodriguez stepped forward as voices rose and accusations flew, his presence restoring enough order for rational discussion. "Folks, let's focus on solutions instead of blame," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd mediated more neighbor disputes than a daytime television judge. Victoria sat in stunned silence, her carefully constructed authority crumbling like a sand castle at high tide. Bradley Pearson was quietly packing his briefcase, probably calculating how to avoid malpractice charges for representing a client who'd been unknowingly operating an illegal commercial enterprise. "That's when I offered the olive branch that would transform our entire community." "I know this is shocking news," I said, addressing the room with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards but didn't want to play solitaire. "But I'm not interested in revenge or destruction. I'm interested in creating something better for everyone." Cousin Angela distributed copies of our proposed community agreement, terms so reasonable that refusing them would make anyone look insane. Parking fees reduced from $0 because they'd been trespassing to $30 monthly per household. Marina access dropping from the association's $175 annual extortion to $125 yearly per family. Boat slips cut from $175 monthly to $85. "These rates are significantly below market value for private marina communities," Angela explained, as residents read terms that would actually save them money while giving them legal access to everything they'd been using illegally. "Additionally, Mr. Thompson proposes establishing a community improvement fund using surplus revenues to benefit everyone." The vote was 38 in favor, with only Victoria abstaining, probably because she was calculating how quickly she could flee the state before anyone pressed criminal charges for embezzlement. Within 3 weeks, our new Bayshore Community Association had replaced the corrupt association with something resembling actual democracy. Victoria quietly moved away after the state attorney general's office began investigating her financial management, her house selling at a 25% loss that became the neighborhood's only property value decrease. The transformation was remarkable. I used the community fund revenues to install proper lighting and security for the marina area, creating the kind of amenities the association had promised but never delivered. We established a public beach area where families could enjoy the marina without trespassing on individual properties. Annual marina cleanup and fish stocking programs turned our water into a model of environmental stewardship. The financial benefits extended beyond my property. When the county reassessed everyone's property values based on legitimate marina access agreements, most families saw their tax burdens decrease, while their actual property values increased due to legal certainty about community amenities. But the real victory was personal healing and community building. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up during Victoria's reign of terror began volunteering for improvement projects. The Garcias repainted their storage shed in colors that made them happy instead of bureaucratically approved cream. Frank Russo's memorial became a source of pride instead of violation notices. My boathouse renovation used sustainable materials and community-friendly design that honored my great-uncle's legacy while contributing to neighborhood beauty. Several neighbors volunteered their professional skills. Sandra's husband did plumbing work. The Petersons landscaped the new beach area. Even some of Victoria's former supporters helped with pier repairs. The most meaningful outcome was establishing Samuel's Conservation Scholarship Fund, using surplus community fees. The program provides college assistance for local students studying marine biology, environmental science, or sustainable development. 4 recipients have already been selected, carrying forward my great-uncle's wisdom about being good stewards of the water we temporarily inhabit. Our annual Marina Days Festival has become a regional attraction, bringing together multiple neighborhoods for celebration of community cooperation over litigation. Local newspapers featured our story as a model for resolving association disputes through research, documentation, and good faith negotiation instead of expensive legal warfare. Property values throughout Bayshore have stabilized at their highest levels ever, proving that cooperation builds wealth better than conflict. Several similar communities have adopted our governance model after their own battles with overreaching association officials. But the story doesn't end there. 2 years later, our small victory in Bayshore had sparked something bigger than any of us imagined. Angela's legal template had been adopted by property rights organizations across the Gulf Coast, and similar grassroots coalitions were forming in communities from Florida to California. The Bayshore model became shorthand for community-based resistance to association harassment schemes. Gerald, now 73 and sharper than ever, started a consulting service helping other neighborhoods organize their own surveillance and documentation networks. Neighborhood Watch 3.0, he called it, complete with digital evidence collection and legal preparation workshops. He traveled to communities as far away as Oregon, teaching property owners how to protect themselves from predatory neighbors and developers. Nathan's surveys of our boundaries became a case study in property documentation, attracting attention from surveying students and municipal officials. The GPS techniques and documentation methods he developed were adopted by surveyors across our region, then across the state. What started as a defense against one bad actor evolved into a blueprint for accurate property rights verification. Frank Russo's veteran support groups evolved into a county-wide elder advocacy program, connecting isolated senior citizens with community resources and peer support networks. The Bayshore veterans became a model for age-friendly community development, earning grants from the State Veterans Department and recognition from the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Garcia family's community garden inspired a broader neighborhood sustainability network that included everything from shared composting to renewable energy cooperatives. When elderly residents needed help with energy-efficient home improvements, the network provided them at cost. When new families moved in and couldn't afford sustainable upgrades, the network welcomed them with starter kits and mentorship. My scholarship fund had grown beyond my wildest expectations, funded not just by my marina revenues, but by donations from grateful families whose own neighborhoods had been saved using our template. We'd awarded scholarships to 63 students over 2 years, and they were making a difference in communities across the region. Most remarkably, the media attention around our story had exposed similar schemes in dozens of other communities. Victoria, it turned out, wasn't a unique predator. She was part of a pattern. Investigative reporters found networks of unscrupulous real estate investors using nearly identical tactics to target vulnerable property owners in developing waterfront areas. Our documentation had provided the template that helped prosecutors build cases in multiple states. 3 years after Victoria's departure, I received a letter that brought everything full circle. It was from a man named David in Tampa, Florida, whose neighborhood had faced a remarkably similar harassment campaign.